EU's position vis-à-vis our negotiations?
I think there are two different schools of thought in Brussels. I think most of the national governments want this to be a cordial and a mutually advantageous process where we keep most of the aspects of free trade and security and intelligence cooperation, military alliance and so on. I think there are some Eurocrats, some figures in the Commission and the European Parliament who are much more interested in making a point about European unity than they are in the prosperity of the peoples of Europe, because of course they're not ultimately answerable to the voters in any meaningful sense. And I think it's obviously much better for us to be talking to the 27 governments who will want to maximise the advantages for their own citizens and will want to approach the thing in the spirit of mutual benefit.
Miranda Green, it's clear that Britain has to continue paying into the EU budget until we leave, take a stab at sometime in the first half of 2019. But this talk that we continue to pay billions into it even after we've gone, I mean, that's nonsense, is it not?
I don't know. I mean, essentially, there is potential here for all the positive sounds that came out last night about trust and unity for enormous amounts of bitterness and rancour, in the great phrase of Roy Jenkins, because of not just this question of whether Britain has to continue to pay in, but also questions of, you know, whether there'll be mutual rights for EU citizens here and Brits in the rest of the EU
that doesn't cost
to remain.
anything.
Doesn't cost anything. And also this question, as you were pointing out, the difference between membership of the single market and access to the single market. So I'm afraid I'm not sure about the trust and unity noises that are coming out.
No, I can see that. These are simply words.
And also I would say that Daniel Hannan's point about the greater willingness to negotiate in good faith and in a positive sense from the other 27 nations, that may be so, but they've got to get this deal through their parliaments. So again, that's going to prove incredibly difficult over the next 2 years, or 15 months of negotiations, to come up with something they can all get through.
Mr. Barnier is not the first one to make it. What do you make of these claims that Britain, even after we've left the European Union, would have to contribute billions?
Yeah, it's so funny, isn't it? We've gone from, oh, it barely costs anything, it's all a lever's lie that we have to pay, to we're being faced with this bill for 50 million. Look, of course, while we are members, while we are, as it were, unravelling the full membership, of course we will continue to pay our subs during that process, and we will continue to use the facilities while we're paying the subs. When we leave, we will make a decision as to which, if any, continuing EU programmes and projects we want to be part of. Now, my own view is that since it was a very close vote here, and since a lot of people feel very strongly about remaining part of Erasmus and Horizon and these various research and educational programmes, there is a very strong case for Britain to continue to be part of some of those programmes, and I don't think anyone would argue with the idea that we should pay our share for that. But the really big ticket items that we've been paying up until now, agriculture, foreign aid, the cohesion funds, I mean, there's obviously no way that that's going to carry on once we've left.
Why do you think Donald Tusk, and we checked it, it's written down in a statement, why do you think he said access to the single market requires acceptance of the four freedoms?
I mean, that is observably untrue. The European Union has a small number of trade deals, but it does have trade deals with, you know, Colombia, Peru, South Korea. Plainly, they get complete access to the single market without having either to pay anything or to accept free movement of people. So just that is factually wrong. I think it's, if we want to go further than just access, if we want to remain part of a mechanism for setting common rules and so on, then obviously any institutions that we remain part of course we pay our share for those, just as we pay our share for the G7, the IMF, the UN or whatever else.
Miranda, the lots of criticism of the British government leaving a vacuum, not giving us a clear enough idea, not its running commentary, but a strategic overview of what it hopes to achieve. And still, we haven't had that. But on the European side, this statement by Mr. Schulz of the European Parliament, if I don't get a bigger role, Parliament will do its own negotiations, that seems somewhat bizarre.
Well, Parliament does have to have a say.
That's a different matter.
Like the other 27 nations do. The European Parliament will have a vote on the deal as well. They have a very sort of bullish negotiator in the person of Guy Verhofstadt, who is not shy about wading into the debate. So they're already very, very involved. And this is a negotiation without precedent. You know, Daniel Hannan was making this point about the attitude in Brussels being less friendly than that in the other nation states. But I would think that that's probably about right. You know, we have the spectacularly rude figure of Jean-Claude Juncker, for example, who seems to sow discord where there is harmony every time he gets involved. And obviously there's a kind of jostling within Brussels to be part of this negotiation because it's a historic moment. There's a very interesting piece in The Economist actually saying that even as a sort of intellectual exercise, how this is handled is being viewed with some sort of intellectual relish in Brussels because it's so complex and it's such an interesting problem for the EU to face, defending unity whilst allowing a nation as large and important as Britain to leave.
Dan Hannan, next year we're going to have elections in Austria, in Holland, in France and Germany. We may even have them in Italy as well. Each one of these elections could produce a result which results in another crisis for the EU. Are we going to have difficulty even getting their attention for Brexit?
Well, in a way, that makes the point. The European Union is going through testing times. I think even the most extreme supporter of the project accepts that. And that's why the last thing we want is to leave in a way that will cause serious economic damage to our allies, who are also our suppliers and our customers. We don't want to leave, for example, in a way that would cause the euro crisis to flare up again, if for no other reason than that prosperous neighbours make good customers. So we want to make this a mutually beneficial process. And I think most people in the other member states feel that way. There is a minority that says, oh, we need to sort of make an example of Britain and show that there's a cost in leaving. But I think that argument fails even in its own terms, because if the European Union has to be held together by fear, then it's a protection racket, in which case I think most of the other member states will say, we want no part of this. So I think it's much likelier that we will have a process of disengagement driven by mutual self-interest. The other member countries will look to maximise their advantage, just as we do, and we will retain our security, military links and so on, while taking back the power to make our own laws.
Well, we shall see, because it hasn't even started yet. We've just got the posturing on both sides for the moment. Dan Hannan, thank you for joining us.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.